I was reading through the story of Jesus' mock trial and crucifixion, and I came across two of the oddest time designations, and I think it's kind of fun to look at them. The first verse is Matthew 26:55. So the context is that the soldiers have come, they've arrested Jesus. One of Jesus' followers cut off the servant's ear. Jesus healed it. And there's a big hubbub. There's this big crowd. You can imagine the tension. And in verse 55, it says, in that hora. Now, hora generally means hour. And if you look at some of the translations, like the NIV, they say, in that hour. What's wrong with that translation? Well, not only is it kind of odd English, but if you say in that hour, it means, well, sometime within the span of 30 minutes or 60 minutes, something happened. Well, there's no way, given that context, that the crowd would have arrested, the soldiers would have arrested Jesus and the crowd was all there. And then, I don't know, maybe 59 minutes later, Jesus says, am I leading a rebellion? So the translation in that hour may be more word for word, but it doesn't make any sense. If you look at hora, it can mean an indefinite period of time. So just sometime during the day. It could mean specifically an hour as one of the divisions of the day, or it can also mean at some point in time. In other words, a specific time that an event occurs. How do you say that in English? Well, I think you say something like, at that time. And if you go through the different translations, you're going to see this sort of thing, where NASB is at that time, ESV at that hour, CSB at that time, NRSV at that hour, at that moment, which is by far the best translations, the net, and the NLT, then. See, what they're trying to say is they're looking at this idiom in that hora, and it can't mean an hour period of time. It has to be at that point the time of this event occurs, right then. And that's why I think the Net Bible's translation is by far the best. At that moment, right away, just right then. And certainly the NLT then certainly works well. The other interesting time designation in this story is in verse 64. So Jesus is on trial before the Sanhedrin. They've just asked him point blank, are you the Messiah? And he says, yes. Well, he said, you said so. And then here comes interesting Greek. And yet, I say to you, op arti, from now, I'll just finish the verse, you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. So he's saying that he is the fulfillment of the Daniel 7 Son of Man prophecy. And even though they are going to condemn him, the tables are going to be turned and he is going to come in the full power of the Son of Man. So the question is this time designation op arti. Now, from now on is probably the most basic kind of translation you can get out of it. And it's pretty close to the Greek. Arti is an interesting word. It can refer to the immediate past, in other words, something that's just happened. It can refer to the immediate present, what is happening right now. And it can be used still of a present tense event, but a little vaguer, just at the present time. So there's some flexibility in the meaning of arti, and this is where BDAG puts our verse. But here's what's interesting. He's talking to the Sanhedrin, and they don't see him immediately coming on the clouds of heaven. They don't see him coming on the clouds of heaven at his crucifixion. And as far as we know, they didn't see him in his resurrected state. So in what sense is it from now on that you're going to see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God. Well, certainly it has to fit in this category, number 3 in BDAG. And yet you can see the problem. Jesus says, from now on, you're going to see this. And they didn't see it. I suspect that the answer to this particular issue is to recognize there has to be something occurring in the present, but it doesn't have to fully occur in the present. It could at least begin in the present. You can't get away from the present significance of RT. Grant Osborne, in his commentary, has a really helpful discussion. He says, there is an imminent and yet inaugurated. See, imminent is a now. Inaugurated is the process that has begun now. There is an imminent and yet inaugurated thrust, as it means Jesus will take his seat with God immediately at his death and resurrection. And in his resurrection, his vindication will be immediately visible to all. Yet at the same time, he will be in the seat of power from his resurrection, meaning with his Father, to the parousia and beyond. So you can't get too far away from the Greek. You have to keep something in the now, and yet history requires it to be more than that. So it fits in the third category of Bauer. Anyway, just a couple of interesting time designations I saw.